Hi, I'm Morgan, and for most of my life, I've been absolutely captivated by the Kingdom Hearts series. It was the first game series I ever played, with my dad bringing home a PS2 console and a copy of Kingdom Hearts 2 when I was 5. It was a pretty easy game for child me to get into, too. It was Disney, and on the lower difficulties it didn't require much skill to get through. But as I got older, people started asking why I actually liked this game. It was such a bizarre mix of Disney and what looked like anime to the American audiences. As I started thinking about it, it was a pretty strange game. Disney was all over it, but it had basically nothing to do with Disney other than using some of its characters and storylines. It was comparable to the bastard child of a whale and a donkey. It wasn't supposed to exist, and yet somehow this metaphorical whale donkey whale? Maybe call it a dale? Anyway, this incomprehensible hybrid became the favorite animal of so many, and became a common household pet of sorts. Kingdom Hearts is now a huge game series, with 12 base games and 6 more collections of these games in one package. With all of that, it still doesn't show any signs of stopping, with one saga just ending, but another planned to begin with the next title released. With all this success, and presumably more in the future, I feel like it's a good time to look back and see how this amalgamation of Disney and JRPG even came to exist in the first place, and how it became a crowd favorite in the past, and has set itself up for future success. This 18-year train ride started with a literal elevator pitch. A man named Shinji Hashimoto wanted to make a game similar to Mario 64 due to its success as an open-world platformer. And completely by chance, he one day found himself in an elevator next to a Disney executive. He had thought that the only way to make a game as popular as Nintendo's new 3D platformer was to use Disney characters, and now was his chance to pitch it to the person who could actually make it happen. If this was not the only way for a game like Kingdom Hearts to be made, by complete chance, neither side knowing what they were about to start, then I'm not sure how it could have been done. Hashimoto was successful, and development started in early 2000. Enter a man named Tetsuya Nomura. He was a prominent name in the Final Fantasy franchise, designing characters and directing some of the most well-received games, such as Final Fantasy VI, VII, and 15. He had also worked on some lesser-known games such as The Bouncer, an early 2000s beat-em-up that didn't receive much traction. However, after designing this game, he moved back to the Final Fantasy team for the Final Fantasy X project. He would become the director and character designer on the original Kingdom Hearts project, and would end up staying with the Kingdom Hearts team for the entirety of its series. Disney originally wanted to develop a game using an all-Disney cast. However, Nomura was steadfast in his opinion that it needed to be an original concept featuring an original main character, but having Disney incorporated it into the game. He was successful in this proposition, but he still had a ways to go before development of Kingdom Hearts met his expectations. Due to Disney appealing to a younger audience, the original game was a simple 3D platformer with its storyline being pushed to the background while gameplay was perfected. Nomura was later told that the game would not succeed if the storyline was lesser than that of a Final Fantasy title. With this in mind, he began developing the story past that of a simple 3D platformer into the JRPG that it ended up being released as. As for the name, Nomura was inspired by Disneyland and Disney World theme parks, and stated that he wanted to name it Kingdoms, but due to intellectual property laws, he could not secure that name for the game. Later in development, as they started working on making Hearts a larger part of the story, it was decided that they would combine the original title with this concept, and thus it became Kingdom Hearts. The game would be announced at E3 2001, and be officially released on March 28, 2002. Before moving on, I would be remiss not to include a little bit about the game's soundtrack composer, Yoko Shimomura. Shimomura has composed all of the game's orchestral themes and music in the games, and almost any music you hear while playing a Kingdom Hearts game was created by her. I say almost because the other music, namely the title music, is created and produced by none other than J-pop idol Hikaru Utada. Utada is a well-known American-Japanese singer and songwriter, and has created all of the opening songs for all the Kingdom Hearts games, even working with people like Skrillex in the process. Now, after that brief deviation, let's get back on subject. We've discussed the game's conception and development, but this still doesn't say anything on why it was successful. This leads into speculation more than anything, but here are my thoughts on why Kingdom Hearts as a game and as a franchise has been successful for so long. To start, think back to the early 2000s. It was a very specific time for the youth culture. Japanese concepts were starting to make their way into America, with the animation for young adults at the time taking concepts and suggestions from Japanese animation, such as the art style tropes like big eyes and general body shapes. This was especially seen in American animations like Teen Titans 2005 and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now I know I'm gonna see some comments like, "But those aren't anime because they're American!" And yes, you're right. But to the typical American viewer, they still look very similar in many ways. But to connect this back to Kingdom Hearts, essentially, Square had hit a goldmine of audiences. They appealed to young children like me at the time, with both Disney for the youngest of audiences and the Japanese tropes that young teens and young adults were starting to enjoy at the time. It hit American bases and Japanese bases just right that it appealed to almost everyone who would be playing video games at the time. It even hit some of the anime crowd with its addition of an OP by Utada, OP meaning opening song and animation like those typically seen in the intros of anime. Also, like I mentioned earlier, it was extremely easy for people to get into due to the gameplay, with it not being wildly difficult at lower difficulties, but yet very difficult at the higher difficulty. I remember towards the end of high school revisiting the original Kingdom Hearts, and realizing I had never played through it on the highest difficulty, called Proud Mode. I decided that I would do a playthrough to see how hard it was. Now, I may not be great at video games, but I've played through both Dark Souls 1 and 3. I'm not going to mention how I haven't beaten 2 because it was way too difficult, but I can say that I'm not so bad at a video game that I can't beat it once I'm good at it. However, it took me absolutely forever to get through the later parts of the game. I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's one of the more difficult games from the time period when on Proud Mode, which allows it to appeal to an even wider audience, that being of those who want extra challenging experiences. On top of all of this, Nomura had the genius idea of not announcing a second game after the first one was released, but rather putting a hint at a second game at the end of the first one, granted that certain requirements were met in the playthrough. This ensured only some players saw the secret video, which allowed it to build more hype easily if players wanted a second game, and if they didn't, the video would just fade into obscurity. This made it a simple task to gauge how well received the first game was, and allowed a clear result for Square to judge off of. Plus, it had the benefit of free marketing for a second game if it was decided that there should be one, making it a very beneficial idea no matter the outcome or reception of the original game. To summarize this all, Kingdom Hearts had the perfect mix of tropes from several types of media and several cultures, such that it appealed to many people, and allowed for its success to be simple despite its amalgamative nature of being a Disney JRPG. It quickly developed a cult following due to its storyline being stretched out across 12 games and several consoles, including mobile phones. Today, we are past the 14-year wait for Kingdom Hearts 3, and the first main storyline of the series has concluded. A new storyline with the same characters is planned, but the next game's announcement is yet to be made, with exception to a spin-off rhythm game called Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. However, that is a story I will save for another day. Thanks for watching till the end of the video. Feel free to like if you liked the video, and please offer some criticism down below. This is the first video essay that I've ever made, and frankly, I don't know if I'm going to continue with this type of video content or if I'm going to change to another type. If you'll notice on my channel, it's been changing a lot recently because I'm reviving the channel from a long time ago, namely 2015-ish. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of content I want to do on here, and if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. Either way, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of what will come, and I will see you all next time.